Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Pandorum, and it's from Cosmodrome Games. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page. You can do that by following the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. Now, Pandorum is a competitive game where you and the other players are these interstellar corporations who have discovered this planet called Pandorum, and before the official Galactic Federation decides to colonize it, you're going to reap as many resources and exploit as many resources from the planet as you possibly can. But of course, the other players have the same idea, so you need to compete against them. You have a giant ship, and you are going around the planet, building bases, building modules to help facilitate getting all of those resources. Now, let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played with a prototype version of the game. So just bear in mind that some things can change in the final version. That's why you should go to the Kickstarter page. But then we're going to come back and we will discuss it further. Pandorum is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players, and the final version of the game can be played solo as well. Each player takes control of a spacefaring corporation trying to harvest as many resources as possible from the volatile planet of Pandorum and come out on top of their rivals. The goal is to acquire more quids, which is the currency of the galaxy, than the other players by the end of the game, which occurs when one player builds their last construction project. To set up the game, first construct the planet. Randomly interlock the 7 pieces of the board, making sure that launchpad area is in the center. Each player takes their harvester ship miniature and places it on the launchpad. On that note, randomly give each player both a 4 parts playmat and a main parts playmat that together represent their harvester. Each playmat has 2 sides depending on the number of players. Each mat also has a different set of upgrade slots. More on that in a moment. The other miniatures in the game are collectively called projects. The larger miniatures are called bases specifically. The smaller miniatures are called modules. The number of miniatures in your stock changes based on the number of players, but you always have half as many bases as modules. Separate the blue resource cards from the deck, shuffle them, and deal 3 to each player. Then, shuffle the rest of the deck and deal an additional card to each player. The rest of the deck is placed within easy reach of all players, face down, and 4 cards are flipped up next to it to create the market. Cards that have the same name and picture always stack on top of each other during the game so that they only take 1 spot in the market. Finally, make a stock of quid currency tokens in different denominations. Randomly choose the start player and begin. Turns take place in clockwise order, and each player gets 1 action on their turn. They may either add cards to their hand or move their harvester, which possibly means that they'll be performing construction as well. To add cards to hand, simply take 2 cards from either the face-up market or the face-down deck. There is no hand limit. You can mix and match where you draw from, and if you draw from the deck, you can look at the first card you draw before deciding what to do for your next draw. Along those same lines, once a card is taken from the market and there are less than 4 cards, it immediately gets replaced from the deck, and you can then take another card from the market if you still have a draw available. Instead, you may choose to move your harvester for the turn. Harvesters must move in a straight line as many hexes as you want, so long as you follow all the rules. First, you must pay the movement fee by taking 1 card from your hand and placing it in the market. Your harvester can't stop on a red hazard hex. If it stops on a launchpad hex or a hex where you've already built a project, nothing happens. If it stops on a hex where an opponent already has built a project, you must pay 1 quid to the owner for modules and 2 quid for bases. If you don't have enough, you pay what you can or not at all and can still move on from there. If, however, you plan to stop your harvester on an empty hex, you must construct a project there. If you don't want to, or you don't have the right cards to build a project, you cannot move to the empty hex at all. Cards are essential for construction. Each one has a symbol indicating which of the 3 types of empty hexes it can be used for. Some cards have universal symbols for all 3 types, and some cards require building next to a hazard hex. To make a module, you must use 1 card that meets those conditions. To build a base, you must use 2 cards that meet the conditions of the hex, and they can't share the same name and picture. Every type of card also has a different way that the players can make quid from that construction. For example, production facilities, when you build a project, give you quid for every nearby hex of a certain type. Generators give you quid for other projects that are adjacent to the new one that you've just built. Dome protection gives you quid for a project built next to hazards, and so on and so forth. After using a card, building your project, and potentially getting your quid, the used cards are not discarded. Rather, they are placed in the upgrade slots of your harvester to activate them. The first slot is the 4 part, and the ability is single use. You need 3 cards for a 2 or 3 player game, and 2 cards for a 4 player game. And once used, these cards are discarded out of game, but the slot can be recharged again by putting the same amount of cards there. These abilities can let you do things like instantly move your harvester anywhere on the board, or treat any card's condition as universal. The center slot is for a permanent effect, and requires either 5 cards for a 2 or 3 player game, or 4 cards for a 4 player game. Cards placed here remain here, and continue the effect until the end of the game. Examples of these abilities are not having to pay any more fees for moving the harvester, and moving your harvester through hazard hexes. The final slot is the cargo. You can put as many cards as you like here. At the end of the game, players will check to see who has a majority in each color of card, and whoever has the majorities will earn quid equal to the number of cards they have in each of them. The game continues like this, with players moving their harvester, constructing projects, upgrading their harvester, and collecting quid through their own projects and taxing other players. When a player has built their last project, this triggers the end game. All other players get one more turn. After that, add up all the quid you've earned during the game, then check for majorities in the cargo. Whoever has the most quid is the winner of the game. That is Pandorum. It's really interesting because when you first see the whole layout of Pandorum, you think, oh, this looks like this hyper-complicated 4X game type thing. But it's really not. That's sort of the beauty of this type of system, is that while the scope of the theme of the game, where you're exploiting this planet's resources, and the idea of having a giant ship and all this sort of has this more grandiose feel to it, really, this is a very straightforward resource collection, resource management game, area control games primarily. You're trying to move your harvester around and you take different hexes for the other players can get to them, but it's not the end of the world if you can't do that. But you might have to basically pay a property tax if you were to land on their projects if they get to them first. And also because that's an end game condition where someone builds all their projects, that's sort of a rushing thing to do. But the other interesting part of the game is the hand management aspect in a couple of different ways. So obviously you need to have the proper cards in order to facilitate building your projects down onto the planet. But even then, you need to pay attention to the fact that, well, some of the cards require you to build your hazards, and if you want to build your bases, you need 2 cards that can do the same thing, but not the exact same card. So that's another little wrinkle in the plan there. Also, you need to be making sure that just because you're building your bases and your modules, that's not really the end condition. The end condition is getting the currency, the quid, from having done that. So you need to pay attention to the actual project abilities on your cards. How are you best going to get quid from them? Okay, I played a card that says I get quid for every other project I have around where I built, but if you play that at the wrong time, you're not going to get any points, or very few points. So you need to, there's no hand limit, so you can hold on to it for the right time, but you also need to be making stuff because other players are going to leap ahead of you if you don't. So there's this constant pressure to perform, but at the other hand, if you perform too early, it's starting to get into weird metaphor territory. If you use your cards too early and not the right time, you're not going to get as many points for them, and this is going to not work out for you. The other thing is that when you use those cards, they don't just go away. They will eventually, but you primarily want to use them for upgrades. There's the single-use upgrades, the permanent, the cargo bay, which is like, okay, I've already got my upgrades that I want. I've got my single-use charge filled for when I want to use that special ability. But now I need to worry about end-game points, and that's another handy little way for you to get points, is to stow away cards and try to compete with the other players. But the other players can see the colors that you have at the same time, so it's this constant, like, looking at what everyone else has, and should I even go for that? Should I bother with that? That type of thing. And that can also, because the cards that you use are the cards that go into those slots, that dictates, of course, like, okay, should I use these cards now, knowing I can put them right into that slot? So, while the game is pretty straightforward, very fast to set up, despite, how big everything looks, it's very fast to set up, very easy to teach and learn, and fast to learn and to teach. It still has a lot of decision-making involved, and a lot of things that you need to decide to do from turn to turn. So if any of that appeals to you, if you like the space-going theme with trying to get resources from a planet, if you like the artwork and the way that the module board is set up and how things can, no two games are going to be just alike, and if you just like the straightforward but still heavy, if that makes sense, area control aspect of it, you don't have to take my word for any of this. You can go to the official Kickstarter page and find out more for yourself and hopefully consider backing the project. You can do that by following the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. That is Pandorum from Cosmo Drone Games. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, for supporting our sponsors. Take care.